I don't want no oil, a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my erstwhile co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together Rebecca and
I keep telling you that means I'm not your co-host anymore.
What?
Erstwhile.
Erstwhile, yeah. No, erstwhile's good.
Is it?
Okay. Yeah, it's a compliment, right? Yeah.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And Rebecca and I are crafting an hour of radio for you here called For a Green Future. And For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about it in the ways that it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your family and your co-workers and your pets and the birds that you see flying overhead and the worms in the ground and the microbes that are like literally giving you the oxygen you need to breathe in the oceans and pretty much everybody and everything, because we're all wrapped up together on this wonderful planet called Earth. And we've got a great show lined up for you today, typical of our high quality broadcasting here on 100.7 FM The Ticket. We're just going to chat for a little bit here for the next 10 minutes or so. Then we have a interview with Linda Seeley, who is with Mothers for Peace out in California, talking about their battle against California's one remaining nuclear plant. Then we'll hear from our wonderful advertisers and patrons. And I can say advertisers plural now since we've got a new one. So, yeah, that's great. That's at the bottom of the hour. And then, Rebecca, what will you be talking to us about after that?
Martin Luther King's effect on the modern environmentalist movement.
Very appropriate for Martin Luther King Day weekend. Then we'll hear from Eco News, Ecological News from around the world. And hopefully at some point during this show, we're going to hear from you. And there's several ways to get on the show. One is to call 877-909-1007. And I have to apologize, I've been saying 866. And apparently the number is actually 877-909-1007. So this explains why the thousands of you have been trying to call in have not actually succeeded. So 877-909-1007. Or you can text at 419-973-5841. Okay, so my little intro, I just wanted to talk a little bit about an experience I had this past week. I'm in Bowling Green, Ohio, and the Kiwanis Club there had a nice presentation from a lady who is from the government, and she's working with farmers, and there's several federal programs that encourage farmers to do things like set aside land for conservation, change the way that they farm so that they don't leave plowed ground where you can leak phosphorus and get runoff into the soil and so forth. And it was a very nice presentation. There were a couple of things, though, that I took away from this, and it kind of made me think about the idea of half measures. You know, environmentalists, ecologists, we are always pushing for organic farming. 100% organic, no more chemicals. Put stuff back in the ground to increase the carbon level in the soil and make the ground more fertile, and don't rely so much on chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides. Now, the kind of farming she recommends is kind of halfway between that and what most farming is today, which is this horrible chemical intensive, energy intensive, that leaves bare ground a whole bunch of the year for lots of runoff to happen and lose more and more soil fertility, which has been steadily depleting our soil fertility all over North America for about 100 years now. Our soil compared to the soil of 100 years ago is really very poor, because we keep farming in ways that keeps exposing dirt and causing runoff and reducing our soil capacity to feed us. And so this program that she represents is kind of halfway in between. She likes to use the no-till agriculture, which is positive in that it keeps organic material on the ground. What you do is you plant a cover crop in between your harvests. So like you might have, you're harvesting corn, and then you plant some alfalfa, and then in the spring you plant corn again. The problem with no-till is that what you do is you then kill the cover crop using herbicides.
All right, slight problem.
Yeah, and so you actually have to use a ton of herbicides to kill your cover crop. And the wonderful thing, quote unquote wonderful thing about it, is that you then don't have to plow up the ground. You just stick your new seeds in the dead soil, and they sprout without any competition from weeds or anything like that. And so it does cause more carbon to build up in the soil, because all those things that you killed decay and hold water and do all the good stuff that cover crops are supposed to do. But you got to use a ton of herbicides. And so I think part of what happens to this with the psychology of people, if they're considering a change in their lifestyle, a change in the way they do things, if they see like the government promoting half measures, it kind of makes them less likely to do anything at all. Because one of the things that she said at this is that only about 3 to 5% of the farmers in Wood County take advantage of these programs and follow these quote unquote modern procedures. Whereas I think if the government were actually promoting full-scale organic farming, which does require cover crops but doesn't require herbicides or pesticides, and has slightly lower yields, but along with those slightly lower yields are increasingly fertile soils, I think if the government went all the way, farmers would actually be more likely to adopt it than when they go halfway. I don't know. What do you think, Rebecca?
I don't know. Farmers kind of live on a shoestring and sometimes want to go for good harvest next fall.
Right.
So it's hard to say, but also they're intelligent human beings who many of them will see the benefits.
Right. And yeah, that focus on this fall's harvest, I understand it, but
that's partly because the government has done this thing where it's encouraged people to go bigger and bigger and require more and more equipment, to the point where you always are just on the verge of losing your farm with a couple bad harvests.
Right. And the it makes it less likely to take the big jump all the way over into organic, because you're kind of retooling the way you do everything.
Right.
And one of the things that this presenter did say was that her biggest obstacle are the farmers that are like, well, that's how my dad did it, and that's how my grandfather did it, and I know it works, even though we can say scientifically it's not going to keep working because you're pretty consistently depleting your soil fertility. in a couple, your sons or daughters and your granddaughters and grandsons may not be able to do it the way you're doing it. So, I don't know. What do you think? 877-909-1007 or text 419-973-5841. Do you think making these shifts in lifestyle that we need, do you think like a half measure is like the better way to go about it? Or do you think we should just be promoting going full hog, full steam ahead, and go all the way to the fully sustainable stuff? Or do people need that kind of half and half? I don't know. It's an important question because we've got to make the shifts, or we know that things are going to collapse.
My poor Aunt Celia spent her entire married life like trying to save up for new furniture, and every time she got some money saved up, Uncle Dale would buy more land because they told him buy more land, bigger's better. You'll do better in the long term. And I don't know. I guess something worked because his sons are still doing the farm.
Okay.
But still,
Yeah. All right. Well, that's what I wanted to talk about at the beginning of the show. And so now I'd like to introduce our guest, Linda Seeley from Mothers for Peace at San Luis Obispo in California. And this is just a wonderful organization. These women have been around for decades fighting both nuclear power and nuclear weapons. And I'm just so happy that I was able to interview someone from that organization on my show. So, Josh, let's head over to the interview with Linda Seeley. Welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and who you're with?
Hi, my name is Linda Seeley, and I'm with the San Luis Obispo Mothers for Peace, who are the legal intervener in matters of safety around the issues at Diablo Canyon nuclear plant near San Luis Obispo, California.
Cool. All right. Now, I've asked you on today because there was a press release by the Friends of the Earth back on the 10th with the title, Environmental Groups Blow the Whistle on State, meaning state of California. But before we get to that specific thing, I was wondering if you could give me a little bit of a history about the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. What makes this particular plant so bad? Why is it so important that we shut this one down?
The most important reason that we need to shut down Diablo Canyon is because it's built right on earthquake faults. There are two major active earthquake faults within 3 miles of the plant, number one. There is an intersection of about 13 earthquake faults that is almost under Unit 1, the Unit 1 reactor. The license to build and operate the plant was given by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission before they were aware of what's called the Hosgri fault. It's the one that's 3 miles offshore, and that's the one they first discovered back in the 70s. But the NRC had already given the license to build the plant to Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E. And so it's like anything else. You go and you invest money in something and start digging holes and building stuff. And then you realize, oh, this isn't a good place to build. But you go like, well, I've already put all this money into it. Maybe we can just shore it up so that it's fine. And that's what happened with Diablo Canyon. It was a comedy of errors from the beginning. Initially, they built the Unit 2 earthquake struts backwards, and they had to take out all of that. And because for the two control rooms in the plant, they were mirror images of each other, but the people who were building it didn't get that part. They built them the same as each other, and then they had to take out all this. So they started building. They got the license to start construction back in 1968. They started digging, and they didn't go online until 1984. the first plant, and then the first unit, and then the second unit went on in 85. It's
So-
been a comedy of errors from the very beginning.
Behind schedule and over budget, like every nuclear plant.
Exactly. It was about 5 times as much as it was supposed to cost initially.
Okay. So it's in a uniquely dangerous spot in terms of earthquakes and in terms of the ocean.
It's 85, it sits 85 feet above the ocean. It's on a cliff above the ocean. As you know, we've been having these incredible storms here this winter, and we're due for another one tomorrow. We've had a lot of deaths, lots of mudslides, lots horrible damage to our state. Diablo Canyon's intake structure, where they suck in 2.5 billion gallons of water every single day to cool the plant and discharge it back into the ocean 19 degrees warmer than it was when it came in. That intake structure is at sea level, okay? They have to have the intake water in order for the plant not to blow up. That's the thing we're most concerned about right now. If debris clogs that intake structure, well, God willing, they can shut down the plant, put it into cold. Well, that's another thing. If you try to put a unit 1 into cold shutdown, which means there's an emergency, you have to shut it off quickly. The unit 1 reactor, much like your Davis-Besse reactor in Ohio, is embrittled. And if you try to shut it down fast, by injecting cold water into it, the chances are good that the whole reactor vessel could shatter into a million pieces, just like you put an ice cube into, or a cold glass into boiling water. It shatters.
Okay. So lots of reasons to shut it down.
Lots.
And you guys had a historic agreement on the shutdown. I'm just, when I read about it, I'm kind of odd in terms of, everybody who was involved and just the scope and depth of this plan. Could you tell us a little bit about the plan to close Diablo Canyon?
I can. Back in 2016, there were 6 groups, I think: Friends of the Earth, Environment California, Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility, the Electrical Union, IBEW, Pacific Gas and Electric, and the state of California, all came together and made an agreement on the rational shutdown of this nuclear power plant, that how to support the community during the time of transition when the plant shuts, and how to make a smooth transition into the green economy. And it was a plan that was praised all over the United States for how good this plan was. And then in 2018, that PG&E had submitted its application to renew the operating license for 20 more years. They submitted that application in 2009. So they had been working on this application for a relicensing of 20 extended years of operation. And in 2018, they formally withdrew that application from the NRC. Case closed. The NRC accepted that move with that withdrawal, and that was it. That application was mothballed. You cannot find it if you go to the NRC docket. It is not on the docket. It's not anything active in the NRC right now, and it was withdrawn in 2018. In the meantime, part of this agreement that was made among all of these groups, in that Friends of the Earth had an active lawsuit pending in the federal court about seismic issues at Diablo Canyon. As part of that agreement, they agreed to withdraw that lawsuit in exchange for shutting down the plant at a date certain. So that lawsuit went away. That lawsuit was about the most critical flaw at Diablo Canyon. And now PG&E has asked, okay, so that's what happened, okay? Then, okay, you have a question for me?
Well, I think you're leading into it. So you had this wonderful agreement in 2016. Everything was going along according to plan. And then all of a sudden, this past September, Governor Newsom of California drops a bombshell on everybody. Tell us what happened?
Okay, this is I would say, Mothers for Peace opinion too, not just my personal opinion. Governor Newsom is running for president, maybe not in 24, but at least in 28. He does not want to have the legacy that our Governor Deukmejian had back in the 80s, I think it was, when we had brownouts, blackouts in the state of California. That drove him out of office. Governor Newsom has taken over $15 million in campaign contributions from PG&E, number one. And Governor Newsom appoints the members of the California Public Utilities Commission. So he has a real tight hold on our energy situation in California. He was persuaded, we don't know by whom, but he was persuaded that if Diablo Canyon were to close as planned in November of 24 for Unit 1 and August of 25 for Unit 2, that if that happened, we would be suffering major blackouts all over California. And he brought the legislature together and he told them if they didn't vote for this bill, that it was called Senate Bill 846, probably crafted initially by PG&E, certainly supported by Governor Newsom. And then he persuaded the legislature by using threats like of vetoing their bills, etc. They published Senate Bill 846 on a Sunday night, and it had to be voted on. The legislature's term ended on Wednesday. It had to be voted on by Wednesday. The legislators it's such a complicated bill. When you try to read it, it's like, reading like
fine print on an insurance policy, maybe.
There you go.
Okay, all right.
And so he muscled the legislature into voting yes for this bill. The legislature didn't know what they were getting themselves into. In the bill, it says, when people raised questions about, for instance, seismic safety, the bill says the NRC will take care of seismic safety. Well, the NRC, number one, there have been two environmental reviews of Diablo Canyon. The first one was done in 1973, 50 years ago. The second one was done in 1993, 30 years ago. There has not been an environmental review for 30 years at Diablo Canyon. They created a group inside of PG&E to take care of seismic updates, but the data that PG&E likes to promote for their seismic updates is not independent data. The data is biased. And so we don't have even an unbiased assessment of the conditions, the seismic conditions at Diablo Canyon with the new seismic data that have been collected over the past 30 years. Okay.
Wow.
It's a catastrophe in slow motion.
So this sounds pretty anti-democratic, right? Because, the process that gave the agreement to shut it down, I literally could not have been more democratic. And this is just kind of autocratic governor just dictating to everybody what's going to happen.
It absolutely is.
And when you combine this with what California recently did in terms of disincentivizing solar, making it less economic to put solar panels on your roof, this is not looking like a good energy policy for California.
No, it's terrible. And that's why Mothers for Peace, along with Friends of the Earth and the Environmental Working Group, filed, oh, by the way, prelude to that, Mothers for Peace wrote letters to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in September and November, I believe. I'm not quite sure of those dates, warning about the illegality of what PG&E has asked for. And let me tell you what they've asked for. They have asked the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, remember that license I told you about that went into the circular file back in 2018 and is dead?
Right.
PG&E has asked the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to do, is to pull that thing out of the wastebasket and give it CPR and revive it and take it up right where it left. In the meantime, since they reached that agreement back in 2016, that's 7 years ago now, they have postponed all kinds of maintenance and capital investment programs to replace worn out materials, because they say it's like having a 1980 Volkswagen. You don't put Michelin tires on it. You try to hobble it along till you can get rid of it and you get your new Tesla. That's not what's happening here. They want to just revive it and just kind of pass by the deferred maintenance and the capital investment that they would have had to do. And then, but they're smart, okay? So they know it's illegal for them to do that. You're not allowed to revive a dead thing according to the rules of the NRC. So they said, okay, well, if they won't do that, then we have another way of getting at it. There's also a rule in the NRC called the timely renewal rule, which means that if you have a nuclear power plant and you want to get a new license, you have to submit that application within 5 years, at a minimum of 5 years before you're set to shut down. Well, there's only a year and a half till Unit 1 is supposed to shut down. And here PG&E says, don't bother with that timely renewal doctrine. We don't have to obey that. You can just, plus there's another thing, but I don't know if I mentioned to you before, but the Unit 1 reactor vessel is one of the most embrittled reactor vessels in the whole United States, about the blowing up.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't tested that reactor vessel's tensility or degradation since 2002. Okay, it's been 21 years. They're supposed to do it every 10 years, and they have gotten exemptions for that testing. And they now, at the end of the lifetime, they want to extend the life of that reactor without testing it to see how very degraded it is. The results of the test won't even be in until after they've asked for the license renewal to be enacted. There ought to be a law. It ought to be illegal,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
And
But
you guys are suing to stop this based
yes, we are.
on those laws.
Yes, we are.
And what are your chances? I mean, where are you,
Slim.
Slim? Where
Yeah.
are you suing? What court are you suing?
Well, we sent the petition to the NRC.
Mhm.
Oh, they neglected to like the two letters that we sent to them in September and November. They never even answered our letters. They never acknowledged receipt of them or anything.
Mhm.
So we have pretty good evidence that is telling us that they probably won't answer our petition either. If they don't answer our petition, we have no choice but to go to the Ninth Circuit Court, file there. It's very expensive. It's very time consuming, but it's the lives of the people and the whole of California that are being put on the chopping block here. And so somebody has to do this, and we're going to do it because we won't put up with this negligence and this lack of ethics that they're exhibiting now and have for many years.
Okay. Well, I think it's kind of ironic this is all happening as California is having a natural disaster. And I think what the world learned from Fukushima is that every nuke plant is literally one natural disaster away from
That's right.
meltdown. So
it's right.
So there we have it. What did you think? I mean, this is just so wrong on so many levels in terms of betraying the people that had to come to an agreement, in terms of keeping literally one of the most dangerous nuke plants in the world, sitting right on top of earthquake fault lines, keeping it running.
Can we please just still kind of pretend we have a democracy?
Yeah, it would be nice. It would be very nice. All right, well, something else that's very nice, of course, are our advertisers and patrons. For Green Futures, brought to you by the Ecofill Shop. The Ecofill Shop is located at 115 West Mary in Bowling Green, Ohio. They sell lots of different things: cosmetics, bath and body, home and garden, cleaning, towels, knickknacks, candles, fragrances, and more. They sell all these things without plastic containers, and the whole purpose of the Ecofill Shop is to eliminate plastic. Customers love them. One customer says, Summer is her name, says, "I am loving the products they offer!" Exclamation point. It's sensible and affordable, all while being eco-friendly and plant-based, eliminating the unnecessary use of chemicals. And that's just one of the glowing testimonials you'll see at their website, ecofillshop.com. I'm one of those customers, and before I came in this morning, I actually shaved using a shaving brush and my little bar of shaving soap that I bought at the Ecofill Shop, and I love it. If you're interested, give them a call at 419-944-8862. It's 419-944-8862, and you can talk to the owner, Jossie, who's very passionate about environmental issues, or you can check out their website, ecofillshop.com, or best yet, just drop in and visit them at 115 West Mary in Bowling Green. That's the Ecofill Shop. And For Great Futures also brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways to get a hold of them. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Or you can go to their website, wcparks.org. Or you can check out their social media presence, which is quite large. They're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., etc., etc. That's the Wood County Park District. And of course, For a Green Future is also brought to you by our wonderful patrons. And our patrons are people who went to patreon.com, that's Patreon. They searched for a Green Future, up popped our Patreon page, and there they chose a level of membership that matched their budget. And so every month a little bit comes out of their account, comes over to us, and that's how we can keep this on the air. Thank you so much to our patrons. We really, really appreciate you. And something else we appreciate every week is a little bit of wisdom dropped upon us by Rebecca. Rebecca, what are we talking about this week?
We are talking about Martin Luther King and his influence on the modern environmentalist movement.
Okay.
A couple of ways that there are a couple of major quotes that everybody cites, which really do seem kind of indicate, an environmentalist perspective. Or, he was working in a time when there really wasn't much in the way of environmentalism going on. It was just kind of starting. But again, one of these quotes is from the 1967 Christmas sermon, and it goes. The quote that people like goes, "It really boils down to this: that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality." Goes on to say, "Did you ever stop to think that you can't leave for your job in the morning," this is the words of Martin Luther King, "without being dependent on most of the world? This is the way our universe is structured. This is its interrelated quality. We aren't going to have peace on Earth until we recognize this basic fact of interrelated structure of reality." Which really does sound like he's talking about more than just, humans are all tied together.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I don't know if I've heard that quote before. Huh?
Yeah, it doesn't get quoted that much. Camille Vincent, the volunteer ambassador at the MLK Historic Site in Atlanta, says, "Our service on behalf of the environment will always be service on behalf of human rights." Human rights as all? What did I write there? I don't know. That doesn't make sense. Of all, something. Anyway, yeah. Also, it had a major formative influence on. He had a major informative influence on the environmentalist movement, because the civil rights movement spawned a lot of other movements. Actually, Asian, Hispanic, gay rights, all this stuff. It was all because people saw what Martin Luther King was doing. It was like, wow, he's having an impact. He's doing it with marches and demonstrations and petitions, and that stuff can work. Wow, strikes. We could do that too for this other injustice that needs to be addressed. So, it was definitely that way. Another thing that he said was, when machines, computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, materialism, and militarism is incapable of being conquered. This was, yeah. That's another direct quote from King I got from baynature.org. And again, materialism, what is that talking about? It's talking about profits over people. It's talking about somebody making money over the welfare of people. So yeah, it does sound like somewhere in the corners of his mind, he was thinking about nature too, as well as. Yeah, it sounds like he was definitely aware of that. Also, his work on the Memphis sanitation workers strike led to environmental and worker safety regulations that happened, along with in the wake of his death. A lot of stuff got passed, and the poor people's war on poverty, whatever it was. And also, there was a thing that he said. This is quoted in an article by meteorologist J. Marshall Shepard in Forbes. Science gives man knowledge, which is power. Religion gives man wisdom, which is control. So it sounds very much like he didn't feel like being deeply religious and a spiritual person was in conflict with science. It sounds like he felt like they both gave us valuable viewpoints on any given issue, which needed to be looked at, basically.
Right. Yeah, well, thank you for that
Welcome.
great report there, Rebecca. And I'm gonna ask you for that quote because I'm gonna stick it into the description on our
I
YouTube
just hand you
and
this,
podcast
but you
version.
might have to call me and find out what I wrote. Like if you can read my handwriting.
I was
good luck with
asking
that.
you for the quote.
I don't know. I never did
Okay.
that well in handwriting class in school. Maybe those young kids have something about just having printing and everybody types everything anyway now.
All right. Well, there you go. That's our timely report since tomorrow is Martin Luther King Day. All right, now on to ecological news, and we got a lot to get through. One of the stories directly touches on that whole materialistic thing you were talking about.
Right.
But the first story we're going to talk about is some good news. There is a new factory opening up. This was reported on the website New Atlas on January 9th. And what it is, it's a company called Form Energy, and they're starting a factory to build iron air batteries, and as opposed to lithium. And in fact, these iron air batteries are supposed to be 1/10 the cost of a lithium battery. They're also extremely cheap. They're also recyclable. They're long lasting. They last much longer than lithium batteries, and they don't catch fire like lithium batteries do. Right. That
sounds like a plus.
Yeah,
to some
that is a
degree.
big advantage. They're going to build. They're spending $760 million to build a factory in Weirton, West Virginia, which is you don't usually associate West Virginia with good environmental stuff, since certain evil senators come from that state. But if this is looking like they're going to actually be able to start selling them in 2024. So just 1 year out, they expect to have them on the market. And the iron air batteries are a little slower to charge and discharge than lithium. They don't give you the instant, but it makes them very good as backup for the grid, basically, if you know.
Another tool in the toolkit.
Yeah, and so, so now this is being funded in part by Bill Gates with his breakthrough energy, which makes me a little bit afraid that there might be something evil here that I'm not catching. But it's one of these advances in battery technology, and we are advancing. There's other kinds of batteries. There's I've talked about before the aluminum carbon batteries that are being developed in Australia. There's a nice story about thermal batteries that they're using in Norway now, which are literally sand batteries that basically they store and release heat as opposed to electricity. All this battery technology is finally coming of age.
So what do you use the electricity to make heat and then it gets stored?
Yeah.
Or you just get the heat directly from someplace?
Yeah, you store the heat however you generate it,
Okay.
like either using boilers or electricity. And then you can heat up this sand to about 1,000 degrees.
Wow.
And then that sand will keep that heat in an insulated tank for like a year. So the best use, the most efficient use is for heating buildings, because then you don't have to keep shifting the heat to electricity and then back to heat again. Because every time you do that, you lose some energy. But it's like, if you use it to store heat, it's like 99% efficient.
Wow.
So it's just another example of a sort of battery, like these iron air, like the aluminum carbon, better than what we've got now. And that's where we should be putting our resources in, developing this battery technology as fast as possible.
Probably a smart thing is to use different batteries for different purposes.
Yeah, exactly.
Depending on what you need.
Right, exactly. And there are different sorts that have different characteristics.
Also might adjust the whole problem of lithium mining to some degree. There's going to be less of that because there's other kind of good batteries out there too.
Exactly. So there's some good news. Some interesting news. This is an article in PV Magazine on January 9th. The Center for Biological Diversity, our good friends over there, we've had them on the show several times, they are suing FEMA because this is in regards to Puerto Rico, because there was, in 2021, there was $9.6 billion appropriated to rebuild Puerto Rico's infrastructure, energy infrastructure, because of getting wiped out by hurricanes. And what the problem is that FEMA seems to be bent on rebuilding it with the old polluting carbon intensive technologies.
FEMA, why?
Yeah, I know. You've got a clean slate.
Yeah.
And so the first thing they're doing is dirtying it back up again.
What are you gonna do next? Bring back asbestos?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, right now Puerto Rico gets 40.
Make our buildings out of all lead and asbestos.
Yeah,
Yay.
lead,
Throw some
asbestos.
mercury in there
Yeah,
randomly.
there you go. FEMA. Right now Puerto Rico gets 44% of its energy from gas, 37% from oil, which is like ancient technology, and 17% from coal. Renewables are only 3%. Now, Puerto Rico has something called the Energy Public Policy Act, which says that they're going to be 100% renewable by 2050. But you're not going to do that if you keep rebuilding your oil and your gas and your coal generation and not building any solar panels. It is kind of interesting that even though they are heavily fossil fuel dependent, per capita, Puerto Ricans only do half the carbon that an average American does. But when I was there in Puerto Rico this past spring, I talked to my tour guide about this, and he said the basic problem is that it's just too expensive because you have to ship the solar panels to Puerto Rico. They don't have any, manufacturing capacity there. So if the government just helped Puerto Ricans a little bit, they would be putting solar panels on their own roofs, and we wouldn't even have to hardly do anything because over and over again we find that if you make it economically feasible for people to do it, they'll do it in a big way. And Puerto Rico's like perfect for solar and wind energy, so it's very practical to be 100% renewable by 2050, but only if you do it. So kudos to our friends at Center for Biological Diversity for challenging FEMA on this one. Second story, and our next story, and this goes to that whole materialism thing that we were talking about. It turns out that billionaires are energy hogs. I mean, this might not be a surprise, but there was a study done in a journal called Ecological Economics. It's the March 23rd issue, so we got like a sneak peek, volume 205, by a fellow named Jared Starr. And he found out that billionaires, the average billionaire puts 3,443 tons of carbon in the air, as opposed to, let's say, the bottom 1% of U.S. consumers who only put 17 tons. So 17 tons versus 3,443 tons, that's a billionaire's household. The average American puts about 42 tons, and the top 1% puts about 1,000 tons. So the top 1% of income, 1,000 tons a year, but the billionaires, 3,400 tons a year. And this could explain why they're so keen on trying to push nukes on us, because they need all that electricity to run heat their swimming pools and heat their 30,000 square foot mansions. And yeah, that's just another example of materialism, because literally billionaires are the most materialistic people in the world.
They got a lot of material.
And they are doing way more than their share in heating up the planet, putting carbon in the air. Just thought that was an interesting little story. All right, now, unfortunately, we come back here to Ohio for this story. This is actually two stories that fall under the broad category of Ohio versus renewables. And there is a push in Ohio to literally just outlaw wind and solar power, as ridiculous as that sounds. But Dan Garino, in December 22nd issue of Inside Climate News, reports EDF abandons plans for 400 megawatt photovoltaic array. Basically, a bunch of noisy people with t-shirts flooded all the council meetings and fought solar panels so hard that the company that was going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into their community dropped the plans. And that meant millions of dollars every year that would have gone to pay for their schools, to their local governments, all gone. And their arguments were all lies. They're saying they were saying it's going to take farmland out of production, which we know and we've reported on that more and more farmers are farming underneath the solar panels. It's perfectly practical. So you can have both farming and solar.
And nobody ever complains about this if it's a billboard or something, you know? It's gonna
Right.
or subdivision you're gonna take farmland out of production. No, all of a sudden we care.
Right, and or a fracking pad, for example, or oil and gas well. They're not complaining about that. They said it's going to reduce property values. Studies show it doesn't. They say it's going to damage soil and water. Well, actually, solar farms, because you don't plow up the field every year and you don't spray tons of pesticides and herbicides under your solar panels, they actually protect soil and water. So these people lobstered. They lobbied.
they acted like big pinchy lobsters
Right,
taking over the town.
They kept pitching at the Ohio Power Siting Board. And so for the first time, the Ohio Power Siting Board rejected EDF's application, and that was enough for EDF to drop the whole thing, which sucks. But it's part of a larger pattern, and here's the second half of this report. Salem, Ohio, which is in Columbiana County, the trustees of Salem have requested that the county commissioners in Columbiana County ban wind farms and solar farms, that they make them illegal in their county. They're joined by several other townships. Fairfield, Franklin, Perry, and West have all sent requests to the Columbiana County commissioners saying we should outlaw wind and solar. And the understanding of this has to tie back into the fact that Columbiana County has one of the highest fracking rates in all of Ohio. There's tons of fracking wells there. So some people are willing to accept poisoned wells, and people next to oil and gas wells getting cancer. This is all very well documented that fracking and oil wells cause people to die. But I guess they're thinking it's only a problem when you try to drink water, which
right.
Yeah. So most of the time it doesn't bother them. But this is where the Marcellus Shale is in Ohio. It's right on the eastern border with Pennsylvania of Ohio. So the thing, as I said, the reason I'm bringing fracking into this is I am willing to bet that if you follow back in who bought all those T-shirts that say no solar and no wind, somewhere back in there you're going to find a fracking company maybe footing the bill. That's my guess. So this is a problem here in Ohio, folks, and we've got to deal with it because we have to switch. We cannot keep fracking. We cannot keep putting oil and gas into the environment. All right, 2 more stories in 5 minutes. See if we can do it. January 11th. All those ones confused me. January 11th on CNN. You might have actually heard this one on the mainstream media. Ocean heat has set another record high in 2022.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that. Fueling
Extreme weather, 4th year in a row. 5 of the last 6 years have been the hottest ocean temperatures ever recorded. All these news reports are citing a journal article in something called Advances in Atmospheric Sciences. On the 11th, there was a story titled "Another Year of Record Heat for the Oceans." It's done by Li-Jing Shang and others. The 2022 heat exceeded the 2021 heat by 10.9 zettajoules.
Wow.
And a zettajoule, turns out, is 10 to the 22nd power joules. And so imagine, a 1 with 22 zeros after it. That's how much heat was more in 2022 than just a year earlier in 2021. And so also what's happening is the salinity index is increasing. The ocean is getting the saltier parts are getting saltier, and the fresh parts are getting fresher. And upper ocean stratification is increasing, which basically all this means is that the oceans are becoming more like a stagnant pond than a churning system that distributes nutrients and supports life. It's becoming more and more like a sort of a a waste pond that you might see outside of a power plant or a chemical company. So very bad news, and again, we need to change very quickly. Final story, just an interesting aside. This was in EcoWatch on January 12th, and the big storm we had over Christmas, the Winter Storm Elliott, it caused massive failures in natural gas and coal plants. So we keep hearing that the reason we need to keep coal and natural gas is so they're so dependable, but it turns out that PJM, we turned out to be 40 gigawatts short of the power that we needed because these coal plants and natural gas plants, things froze up, things got blocked and didn't burn. They failed, and PJM's looking at $2 billion in fines to these generation companies that didn't provide power at the most critical part. And the ironic part about this story was that if people hadn't lost power, like because lines got blown down and stuff, probably the grid would have crashed. So the only thing that saved the entire grid from collapse was trees knocking over power lines. 70% of the failures were gas plants. And it's just a reminder, solar plants don't fail in those situations. There's no valves to get stuck. There's nothing to catch fire. Wind also is very robust in those situations. So the wind plants kept going, the solar plants kept going, the gas plants and the coal plants failed. So next time someone tells you we need to keep fossil fuels to keep the lights on, they are wrong. That's it for this week.
These two have not worked.
Yes. Thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate you spending an hour with us every week. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done.